Welcome to Smart Route, the podcast by Call Tracking Metrics, where you'll hear stories from businesses at the intersection of marketing, customer experience, and sales. We're sitting down with business leaders and industry experts to dive deep into the path they took to find success. Here's your host, Andrew Clark.
Hey everyone, this is Andrew Clark, your host of the Smart Route podcast, brought to you by Call Tracking Metrics. Here today with a new episode, and I think this is, I say this about every episode, but honestly, sometimes you meet guests as part of this process, and you just bond really quickly. And this is one of them. James Milsom of Hunter.io came to me in a very kind of roundabout way through some SEO outreach from his team, and it just stars aligned, and here we are. We've had a really good initial conversation, and it's like, James, please come on and be a full guest, and he agreed. And he's got a lot going on, which some of it we'll talk about. But James, thank you for taking the time to be here with us today. Just a quick introduction of who James is. He's the head of marketing at Hunter.io, but he brings with him years of experience across the UK and the US and other global markets as well in the SaaS space. And he's doing some really great things with Hunter, which some of our listeners may already be familiar with. It's a contact information validation service. I've used it pretty extensively over the years as an SEO, doing just cold outreach to people, making sure I get the right email address, or at least within a close amount of accuracy that I'm not going to have an autoresponder say, yeah, you failed. But we'll talk more about what is going on over at Hunter and some of the great lessons that have been learned over this past year. They did a really cool competition that James will be sharing about as a case study. And yeah, I'll turn it over to you, James. If you could just introduce yourself, give a brief background of what you're about, how you got started in the marketing field, and what you're up to currently.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Andrew. It's a small world, isn't it? I was thinking as you were saying there about how our relationship came to be, and I think that is a really good illustration of what I want to talk about today to your audience.
Mm-hmm.
I think that um, everything that I'm going to tell you about my career just now, it's all built on relationships, and um, you know, something can always come out of nothing. So my background is a bit of a funny one. I think a lot of marketers may relate to this. I know that when we were talking, Andrew, before we recorded, there are some similarities here. So my background from the United Kingdom, my education is primarily in law. I have an undergraduate in law, I have a master's degree in international law and human rights. And I really didn't want to go and practice. I had a bit of experience, didn't like it. And so I really found myself in a bit of a position where I didn't know what I wanted to do. Luckily enough, I got my foot in the door with a local charity, an education charity, and got really close with the head of marketing there, a man called Gordon. And that's sort of like how my career has progressed. Honestly, it's been one of those things where I'm a trained extrovert, and that means that I have to really put a lot of effort into building relationships. But when I do manage to build relationships, some stage I'll be able to help that person, and vice versa. And so I've done everything when it comes to marketing. I have back when this used to be a thing, I would print flyers, I would print newsletters, stock the stock room as a marketing intern, getting the coffees, all the way through to sort of pivoting towards digital marketing and lead gen, more specifically, in a pretty large organization. And throughout the course of about, I think it's 12 or 13 years now. I don't like to admit it because it makes me feel much older than I want to say.
Right there with you.
In that period of time, I've really grown to love um, product marketing really as my base interest, and that's such a solid foundation I've found to be able to go from being in digital marketing to then pivoting to product marketing to then pivoting to leadership roles, heads of marketing, in two or three different organizations. And so I have managed marketing teams, I've managed SDRs, BDRs, I've managed SEOs. I love learning, and because of the sort of
Mhm.
trajectory I've had in my career where I've really learned how to do things, I know a little bit of everything. I know a little bit of everything to the point that I can be dangerous with that knowledge. But I've always been surrounded by really, really talented people, and obviously one of those people was from my team that reached out to you. Um, yeah, a really, really exciting time at Hunter, and I'm so proud to have been here now for I think 8 months. At the point of us, sitting down today, and there's so much to get through. Um, but I just want to say everything that I want to talk to you about, Andrew, is through the lens of a marketer. It's not through the lens of
Sure.
anything other than that. It's as marketers, we are blessed with the ability to care about data, to care about being thoughtful in how
Mhm.
we approach things. And I hope everything I'm going to share today really, lives up to that expectation.
Well, we appreciate it, and I mean, yeah, everything you're saying about kind of the winding path that led you to where you are currently resonates with me, and as you said, likely with a lot of the listeners. I just want to go back briefly to what you mentioned about finding kind of your real passion in product marketing. Could you just elaborate a little more on what about that specific kind of niche within the marketing umbrella you love the most?
Yeah, I think for me, when it comes to product marketing, and if we boil it down to its simplest explanation, it's being able to take a product or a solution and translate that through the eyes of the people that that thing has been designed for. Um, it's something that I gravitated towards to the point that when I when I became a chartered marketer for the Chartered Institute of Marketing, I wanted to take that a step further because that gave me a foundational knowledge just of marketing principles. I ended up becoming a pretty big supporter of the Product Marketing Alliance, and all of these sort of little journeys that I took in terms of my education really were designed to help me to understand the basics of what it is that we do. Because what we do is just it's a relationship. Um, whether I'm sending you an
Mhm.
email, whether I meet you at a conference, whether I'm listening to this podcast, it's all about a relationship. And for me, product marketing was a great way to deliberately not feel like when I try to communicate to you what the thing is that I have to offer and the benefits, I'm not doing it in a way that is superficial. I'm doing it in a way that really I have something for you, and I know that it can help you because I've gone through a process of understanding what that thing is, how people like you would react to this, what you would see as the benefits, what your challenges are.
Mhm.
And then I've been able to create messaging, I've been able to create campaigns that help you to really, understand why this is something you should consider. So when you look at it in that way, it pulled me in because once you can go for effective positioning and messaging of something, it's so much easier to do outbound. It's so much easier to help your SEO team to slightly tweak their outreach in terms of link building. It's so much easier to build out a content plan because you know your audience. And when you know your audience,
Mhm.
that is it's cliche, but that's sort of a silver bullet in some regards. It's the difference between a company being successful with their go to market and not being successful, is what I've found.
No, that's I think a great insight, and yeah, I mean, I always love speaking with people like yourself that are very passionate about what they do, whatever niche it is, even if it's something I personally have never touched in a very direct way. But um, I you talked a little bit about what now you've been with Hunter coming up on 8 months, like how yeah what well, first of all, I think and I know what Hunter is, but for our listeners who are maybe unfamiliar with the company, could you just share briefly what is Hunter, how did it come to be, and what is it trying to solve for people?
Yeah, so Hunter is an all-in-one outreach platform. Um, its origins, we're coming up on 10 years, in fact, of Francois and Antoine, our founders. Actually getting into a place where they made this thing a success. They had gone through a couple of different challenges with loads of different ideas, and they never really had taken off. And then Hunter is the one that took off for them. And over the years, we took a really strong position in helping people find the email addresses um, of professional contacts, helping to
Mhm.
verify that data. So making sure, to your point, that when you send an email, it doesn't bounce, and then just building out loads of different tools. And I think one of the things that was really exciting for me being able to work with Hunter was I've used Hunter. It's it's such a pleasure to be able to use something that sorry, to market something that you've used because you understand the product really well. And so Hunter has evolved from a collection of different tools in terms of verifying emails, finding emails, using someone's website address to then be able to find Andrew's details specifically and get his email address. Um, it's evolved greatly in the last 2 years, actually, to the point that it's an all-in-one platform now. Like nothing is disconnected, it's all in one place. We keep making these rapid improvements that I'm seeing every day. Our engineering team just absolutely knock it out of the park, and I might have a suggestion, and the next thing I know, it's been introduced into the platform. So we help founders primarily, people who have an idea, have a product, um, and want to connect themselves with their ideal customer. Now, there are other different use
Right.
cases, like you said, like SEO agencies, for instance, use us
Hmm.
heavily, recruiters use us heavily, and of course, salespeople use us. But I firmly believe that Hunter's value is in its ability to just be able to provide you with good, reliable data that you can easily access. It's affordable, it's effective, and you know it's always free. If you don't want to pay for it, you can always have a free plan and get value out of it that way. And that's so refreshing from typical platforms like ours that perhaps give you barriers. You can just jump into Hunter right now. You
Sure.
can head to the website and you can create an account. So it's an exciting platform. There's a lot of really cool things in the works, and for me, my job is to come onto these sort of podcasts and talk genuinely, first and foremost, as a user, about why I think it's great. And the best way to do that is to talk to you about everything I'm going to talk to you about today.
Yeah, and let's get right into those things. We had talked a bit, as we're playing this episode about where to start when you don't know where to start.
Hmm.
Especially if you're doing some cold outreach, which I can speak to firsthand of like, okay, I know an industry that I'm going after for the sake of link building, or you know, I'm thinking of my sales team here at Call Tracking Metrics. Maybe you want to reach out to somebody it's like yourself, a head of marketing or a CMO, CRO, whoever. Tools like yours allow you to have a better chance of connecting with those people and, to your point, building those relationships. And I think, yes, we're going to talk extensively about the relationship building,
Hmm.
how to do that the right way, especially in the age of AI where it seems
Yeah.
like people are just pumping out content and just sending it. But yeah, I'd love to hear more about like what we were talking about in the playing episode. How, where, yeah, what is that starting point? How do you formulate the questions to ask that will guide you in those subsequent steps?
Yeah. I want to preface this and say that I know that a lot of people want to jump from A to Z, but it's
Hmm.
it's super important that you start with A, B, and C. And the first and foremost thing that you need to be able to do is to define who your ideal buyer is. And that might be called an ideal customer profile, that might be called a buyer persona. It doesn't matter. It's really what do I have and who do I think would be appropriate to reach out to be able to connect what I have with that person. And so, bringing it back to what I said about product marketing, if you can nail down where your ideal customer sits in the world, what their industry is, what their headcount is, and then get a little bit more nuanced around were they recently funded, do they have certain technologies that you use, maybe you offer HubSpot consulting services, and so you can get really really narrow with how um, you actually end up targeting people to reach out to in those companies. That's the first
Hmm.
step. You have to be able to know and articulate clearly who you're trying to help. Because if you can do that, then that's when you can use different tools like Hunter to be able to find the people in those companies that you want to reach out to. And so once you know who it is that you want to reach out to, the second thing that you need to be able to do is articulate what their problems are. And how you find that out is
Mhm.
really a case of relationships. It's asking people questions. It's looking through LinkedIn posts of people that, sit within those target companies that you figured out in the first point. It requires some effort. It requires you to do a little bit of
Mhm.
research, because that little bit of research is the difference between me talking to Andrew about something that is completely relevant to him versus something that's completely irrelevant to him. And the second you become irrelevant is the
Absolutely.
second you'll spam. If you can articulate that, if you can connect the company to the challenges that they may be having, and give a bit of context by doing a bit of research, the final thing is being able to actually reach out to them. And you know, we earlier this year, uh, someone in our team who's brilliant, Jemek, absolutely brilliant with data analysis. He goes into our database, and essentially is able to create a report on 11 million emails from our users. And
Oh
what
my
he was able to
gosh.
do pretty quickly, which is impressive in and of itself, how quickly he did it. He was able to
Mhm.
pull out some pretty key factors that will influence your ability to be successful or not. And success is getting people to reply to your outbound outreach. So in that
For
in that
sure.
third instance, what you want to be able to do is have the contact details of the right person within your target company who would be interested in the message that you've developed for them, and get that message delivered via email. Like, those are three really basic things that you should want to do. And I say email not because I want to come on here and promote Hunter. Not at all. I would say this even if I did not work for Hunter. The majority of decision makers that we surveyed, of 217, in fact, decision makers we surveyed, they still prefer email as the method of outreach versus LinkedIn or cold calling. Now, that's not to say
Interesting.
don't do LinkedIn outreach. That's not to say don't do cold calling. What it's telling you is that your Trojan horse for outbound should
Mhm.
be email. Attitudes have changed.
Yep.
So it makes sense that if you're starting with the basics here, the basics mean knowing my target company, knowing their pains and my solution and how that resolves those pains, and then having the right technology to help me to send a message via email. Like, those are really basic. And the
Mhm.
great thing is that all those things are not expensive in terms of money.
Yep.
They just require you
Mhm.
to be thoughtful in how you go about that process of finding enough people who will relate to that message to then deliver that message, and then being committed to just learning. And that's why data, to me, is so valuable, because if you start small and you look at campaigns, maybe 50 people or so,
Mhm.
you'll be able to see patterns there that you can then improve your copy, you can improve your subject lines, you can improve your targeting. I think that's why it's important that you have a basic understanding of product marketing, because
Mhm.
without knowing those basics of the company, and how to connect the company and your solution to a pain, you're going to more than likely annoy someone. And I think we've both probably received about 12 of those emails today.
Yes. Very spot on. And actually, I'd love to just dwell a little more on what you're saying about how email messages are what resonate best with these decision makers. I
Mhm.
mean, as you're interviewing these people, did anything come out as to why that is? I mean, I have a hunch as to why they would say email is the way to go, but yeah, what were these interviews proving out?
It is about respect.
Mm,
And when I say that, it's about LinkedIn has become a bit of a parody of itself. it has got to the point where everyone is suddenly starting to, well, not suddenly, everyone now is just selling on LinkedIn. It's not about telling stories or giving helpful advice. In fact, I would argue you could find that on Substack right now. That's not selling, that's real value.
Mhm.
um, and at the same time, when you think about calling, um, a lot of decision makers just, they're not in the office after COVID, or if they are in the office, you're going to have to go
Mhm.
for a decision tree. In which case, you again are still going to need to get the right information, and getting a phone number is infinitely more difficult than getting a professional email address. And
Mhm.
so, cold email or email, uh, why it's about respect to these decision makers is that I have the ability to ignore your email or not. And I have systems in place that will push you into spam if you immediately off the bat are sending me something that is offensive or a waste of my time. Um, if
Mhm.
you make it into someone's inbox, then you've done something right. And then if you're able to get your email opened, again, you've done something right. So it's about that relationship. It feels more like there's a lot more control involved in there, and the control meshed with the respect angle. Um, I think we're much more comfortable with the idea of, oh, I'm going to come back to that email from Andrew in, the next 2 days. I won't respond straight away. I've got a lot of things going on. Whereas things like
Mhm.
adverts are fleeting in their presence. Social media, LinkedIn, it's gone in, gone in the blink of an eye, and everything's kind of molding together. Email remains one of the systems where we all have control. And so I think that from the surveys, what became evident is that you should use email. However, when you dive a little bit deeper into that data, you can see that, um, unfortunately, 95% of those emails are spam. So the optimism is
Yeah.
not being met with a reward. The optimism has been met with
Mhm.
punishment, which, um, it's a fascinating psychological conundrum to kind of figure out.
Absolutely. And I know we had talked about your inter-office competition that you guys did in March, Messaging Madness.
Hmm.
Don't sue us, NCAA. Um, but yeah, the way you described it to me, and I'd love for you to share about with our listeners. Yeah, like what was kind of the genesis of it? What were those insights that bore out from doing this competition at the office?
So Messaging Madness came off the back of a conversation with Matt, our CEO, and we get into these sort of, a bit like the conversations we had before we started recording, where
Mhm.
you're just kind of going back and forth with ideas. And we were looking at the data from our state of cold email report, that I was referring to a second ago, and we're asking ourselves, well, if 61% of decision makers still love email, but there's a 95% spam issue, how do we demonstrate to the world what is spam and what is not spam? And the report goes
Mhm.
some way in terms of telling you, here are the 12 factors that will help you to be more successful with your outreach. But ultimately, it really comes down to your commitment to wanting to understand your audience more thoroughly. That's really what
Mhm.
it is, regardless of channel. Actually, if it's cold email or adverts or, you know nurture emailing. And so we had an idea that maybe we could take to LinkedIn and ask people to share their best emails, and we would get people to vote, and there would be some sort of reward. But
Mhm.
that kind of, I think people would have been like the tortoise in the shell, and like wouldn't want to come out and show what they've been working on. And I was just getting ready to fly out and spend some time with my wife in the States, and I knew that her grandmother was getting excited. Her grandmother's like 88, and she only watches college basketball. And I just had a light bulb moment. I thought about March Madness. uh, March Madness has this energy about it. It's a defined period. It's quite clear in its structure, its purpose, and it just lends naturally to create energy and excitement and entertainment.
Mhm.
And I thought to myself, well, what if we were to emulate that format? And to emulate that format, obviously we don't have conferences. I thought, well, what is a suitable replacement? And when we looked at the data in the State of Code Email 2025, what became quite evident is that when you understood your audience better, um, you would have a
Mhm.
higher reply rate. And so the question to myself was, well, actually, that's great, but what about if I'm an SEO manager versus a founder
Mm.
versus a consultant versus a growth manager? We're all going to have different
Mhm.
ways of wanting to talk to our audience. We're going to all have different ways of kind of um, leveraging information. And so from that came this idea of creating a tournament of 64 entrants, 16 entrants grouped into a scenario each, 4 scenarios. And those scenarios were built around what we just talked about, right? Which is a
Mhm.
well-defined a well-defined business that you want to target, well-defined pains that business experiences, some context for our contestants around sort of what are some competitors, and then a call to action. And we vary the call to actions between things
Mhm.
like I want to have a meeting with you, can I share this report, etc. And we opened it up to the public to enter, and we had hundreds of people want to enter, which is amazing. um, the little challenge that I had not anticipated in terms of the excitement was that actually now we need to be able to whittle that down to 64. Um,
Mhm.
so
Right.
pretty quickly we defined using the report, using the State of Code Email 2025 report. We found the factors that make or break someone's ability to be successful, and that's clarity, personalization, relevance, trustworthiness, and readability. And then we defined on a score of 1 to 3 sort of how effective you are at each of those factors. And we got to a point where
Mhm.
there was Matt, there was myself, there was Antonio from our SEO team, and then we had Zemek, who did all the data analysis for our report. And we all scored the emails, and it was fun. It was wild, and that was before we even got into the place of actually starting the tournament. So it just came out of
Oh my gosh.
it just came out of this desire to do something different. And when I say
Mhm.
different, it's not different in terms of, well, clearly there is a March Madness and there are tournaments, but I wanted to put the spotlight back on um, people like you and I, and our ability to take the information from that report and then write an
Mhm.
email for that scenario that would follow
Yep.
what we've defined as best practice.
Which I think is great, to actually take data and use it for something, context swapping this March Madness concept, applying it to the B2B world and testing out what you're seeing from the report. Um, you know, you got my wheels turning about what we could do with. We have lots of call data.
Yeah.
I would love to, do calls versus cold emails and prove you wrong, in the most friendly of way.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
you
Exactly.
know, and again, I think that way of going head to head with people, having a friendly competition and really see, okay, what actually works, what doesn't, and have everybody learn from it. Which,
Mhm.
I mean, just hearing about how many people were entrants, I can't imagine the review process, like how long that took to whittle it down to those 64 and then go from there.
Yeah.
But yeah, can you tell a little more about, okay, you got down to this smaller pool,
Mhm.
how were you actually testing out what was working and having people advance?
So we built an interactive bracket. We had a tournament hub. We had a bracketology. We had everything that you would normally expect from March Madness. And so the point of the point of this really, was to test the ability of our entrants to promote their entry. That's really important, because while we had a promotional
Hmm.
engine and it generated a lot of awareness and traffic to the site, it was important that our entrants were able to promote what they had created. And so, bar two entries, because we did seed two AI written entries, because I was fascinated to see how they could perform. um,
Hmm.
we ended up with something wild, like 130,000 votes across the entire tournament, which, um, it's a lot of energy. It's a lot of conversations. It's a lot of brand building. It was exciting. It was really
Hmm.
exciting. It wasn't about the product. It was about the people that would use a product like ours. And what was really really interesting was, in the first round, two of our number one seeds got eliminated. And then, get to the next round,
Really?
another number one seed
Wow.
gets eliminated. And you think, and you think to yourself, this is an interesting exercise, because is there a disconnect here between what the data is telling us and what people
Mhm.
um, prefer? And Zemek, bless him, I gave him the task after it was all said and done. And I said, "Hey, can you go ahead and do some analysis? Here are like 10 burning questions I have, like the one that we just talked about now."
Mhm.
And I said to him, "I'm really interested about some of the patterns we saw here. you know when you
Yeah.
look at the people that ended up winning in their scenarios, because they got through to the follow-up four. By the way, the naming of the rounds, you had the Super 16, you had the open
Mhm.
rate 8, the follow-up 4, and then obviously the championship game. And
Nice.
like, that's probably a little inside baseball for your listeners, that I'm quite cheesy when it comes to messaging. Matt has to rein me in.
We appreciate
but
it.
but when we got to the follow up four, so we had all the winners of their scenarios, seeded into that
Mhm.
last four people. Um, you had a real mix of writing styles. So what we found was, like, for instance, our growth manager scenario, a guy called Connor. His email was 52 words long. That was it. It
That's
had a
it.
strong hook, a sharp CTA,
Mhm.
and had some social proof. Short, punchy, and it worked. It got him. He just kind of like walked through his bracket, his scenario. Like, he just completely owned it. And then
Mhm.
you had the rest, and you had Philippe, who was our consultant scenario winner. His email was long, and it was casual. Ryan, who covered off our founder scenario, that was even longer than Philippe's, but it was backed up by context and lots of proof. And then Anna, spoiler alert, who actually won the whole thing, who won our SEO scenario, and she
Mhm.
ended up winning against Ryan in the end. She had a warm, respectful tone that felt genuine and personal. Everyone was different.
Hmm.
And it really, if I think about some of the key learnings, it took me way back when to sort of my beginning in marketing, and understanding positioning and messaging and personas. It turns out that actually the basics do still matter. You need to know your audience, and
Mhm.
that means you have to take the time to make sure every sentence counts. The tone of your
Yep.
email has to be something that your recipient would have expected, because, for instance, Felipe, with his consultant tone, would not have worked for the SEO outreach scenario. That definitely would have worked.
No.
It mattered that the contestants took the time to match up the scenario to their ability to then match that up with, okay, well, if I was in the shoes of the recipient, what is it that I would want to receive? And
Right.
I loved seeing that, because the fear when you run anything like this is that someone will just use ChatGPT, not do it effectively, and the quality wouldn't be high. But all 64 entrants, I was really blown away. And that wasn't to say that I'm would downplay the people that entered, but when you see the 95% spam stat, it kind of creates some expectations that maybe the copy won't be the best. But it was fantastic,
Mhm.
absolutely fantastic.
No, that sounds wonderful. And uh, for listeners, we love linking out to reports and anything that came out of this. If that's available in public, we'll make sure to include that in the episode. Um, but yeah, I think what you said about getting back to basics is more relevant than ever, and something that I think all of us as marketers, and I'd even extend it out to salespeople and anybody working in a business that's doing marketing in some way. Yeah, just back to basics. The world of AI as it's being rolled out now, like it's the Wild West, and I think a lot of things are just going to be in a state of flux for a long time. So I think going back to what we said at the top of this episode of emphasizing that relationship building and then doing it, following it on with all those things that you described through email, whatever way of communication, really, I think is really just, I don't know. You can disagree with me, but I would say that's the biggest thing I want people to walk away from this conversation. Just keep it simple, but also be very tailored to who you're reaching out to. Um, yeah,
Yeah, I would agree. And I think if you're considering using AI in any stage of this process, and you could even be looking to use AI to help you with your call scripts or to help you with leaving voicemails, um, it's important that you prompt effectively and thoughtfully. And guess what? The prompts need to be built around the three things we talked about at the beginning.
you're
Well,
right.
two, right? Like,
Yeah,
without the knowledge of all these people, you're just going to end up with something that is just like every other message. And we have developed recently a library of prompts to help people if they do want to explore using AI in their email outreach. I absolutely would encourage it, but I would always put a little asterisk on it, which is the relationship still matters, and the relationship is going to be built or broken on the back of your ability to actually understand this person. And AI can give you a starting point. It can get you 90% of the way there, but you're still going to have to put time and effort into understanding the audience, referencing something that is true. We know AI
yep.
hallucinates. And then
Yes, all the time.
yeah, and personalize and make sure you go over things effectively. And that was a really interesting thing that we got from the report that we did earlier this year for the state of cold email. Smaller campaigns are more successful. They just are. And that's because you've taken the time to really think about who you're reaching out to and making sure that what you write is relevant to that person. And again, it is not any different from your ability to pick up the phone and make a call to a lead in your CRM. You still have to think about who is this person, what do they care about, and that's never going to go away, no matter what scenario we find ourselves in 6, 12, 18 months down the line.
For sure. And as we get set to conclude this episode, I always love asking our guests, what are some pieces of advice you would give to younger marketers getting their start in this field?
This is cheating because this is what my dad said to me when I was a child, but it is this: don't say no to any learning opportunity, whether that is feedback from a manager or a peer, a, a certificate, a diploma. I don't know what it is, but don't turn your back on the opportunity to learn, because that will never fail you, because it will always help you to be better tomorrow. And that is cliche, but as a 7-year old hearing my dad say that, it still sits with me.
That's perfect. And James, thank you so much for being here. Where could people follow you and connect more with you?
Yeah, so in terms of following me, you can find me on LinkedIn. It's just James Dash Milsom. I was one of those few people that got to get their name on their URL pretty quickly. And then in terms of Hunter, you can find us again on LinkedIn. It's hunter.io. And then, yeah, we post regularly. I'm always open to hearing from people. So whether it's LinkedIn via, the company page, whether it's via myself, or if you want to email me, I would tell your listeners just go and use domain search on Hunter. You'll find me there, but I won't. I'll
There
cut
you go.
them. Just find me. It's James at hunter.io, and I'm always open to talking to people about anything when it comes to go to market.
Well, great. And thank you to our listeners for tuning in today to this episode and all our past episodes. Make sure to go back in the archives, check out past episodes. We've got great other guests as well across the marketing industry and sales. And we'll see you next episode. Take care.
Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Smart Route Podcast. Share your favorite takeaways with us on Twitter at Smart Route Pod. Smart Route is brought to you by Call Tracking Metrics, and you can find more at calltrackingmetrics.com/podcast. Follow along for ideas and conversations that will inspire your own business path forward. Speaking of smart paths, are your marketing, sales, and service teams on the same page? In today's remote world, it's easy to get disconnected. Call Tracking Metrics can help. We empower smart marketing teams to determine the best route for campaigns by showing exactly which ad campaigns are driving conversations that convert. Operational teams can use that data to automate call flows and power contact center success. Visit calltrackingmetrics.com to see why more than 100,000 customers around the globe trust Call Tracking Metrics to manage communications for their marketing, sales, and service teams.